Welcome to Education Insight Weekly. I'm Lacey Kendall. Today we'll talk about a 10-year study on our California continuation high schools, where the results surprised educators from Redding, California to San Diego. Continuation schools earning high marks. That story coming up on Education Insight. But first we take a look at what folks are talking about this week in education. In 2022, California passed Proposition 28, which took 1% of the California budget and applied it to arts education in public schools. That proposition was energetically promoted by educators, labor groups, actors, and artists, including Jeff Bridges, Katy Perry, and Christina Aguilar. The State Department of Education has reported that now all of the $1 billion have been provided to schools throughout California. Many schools have already used the funding to hire arts instructors and bring back their art and music classes that in many cases were taken away decades ago. But a recent report from Cal Matters says some schools are misspending it. Many in Sacramento now believe that some schools merely swapped out their existing art funds with the Prop 28 funds and spent the rest on other non-arts projects. Abe Flores is the Deputy Director of Policy and Programs at Create California. And he says the intent of Prop 28 is, quote, to have more arts in California public schools than we did before the proposition. He adds, Prop 28 states that schools must expand their arts programs. It does not say they can backfill, end quote. Schools that are expanding the arts are saying that they're getting the results they expected, improved attendance and greater academic achievement. In the coming months, schools that are not demonstrating new growth in the arts will be contacted by auditors and state officials. We'll keep you posted. For some time now, schools have experienced a shortage of arts education. But California is facing a shortage of arts teachers. And to tackle the issue, the state is considering new approaches. Currently, there's a focus on career technical education, or CTE, as a potential solution. However, the challenge is that CTE credentials are mainly used in secondary classrooms. That leaves elementary students without the benefit. In response to this, Governor Gavin Newsom's proposed 2024-2025 state budget, still subject to changes in May, aims to bridge that gap. The governor is directing the Commission on Teacher Credentialing to create a new pathway for career technical teachers, specifically for elementary arts and music education. Now, that initiative aims to bring more working artists like musicians and animators into elementary schools, enhancing artistic learning for younger students. Arts advocates are cheering the move, considering it a positive step towards a more well-rounded education experience. Expanding CTE credentials to elementary schools could certainly be a game changer, especially as the education system continues to deal with staffing challenges post-pandemic. Despite the optimism, experts advise caution and patience due to our bureaucratic process. The May revision of the budget might bring significant changes, but there are also concerns about whether artists have the necessary skills for teaching younger children. While some suggest widening the existing arts educator pipeline, others are stressing the importance of proper training in child development and pedagogy for CTE teachers, striking a balance between creating new pathways and ensuring teacher preparedness. A new report from the John W. Gardner Center for Youth and Their Communities at Stanford University shows that alternative schools in California are doing better than expected. In many cases, better than traditional public high schools. Alternative high schools, which consist of continuation schools, community schools, court schools, and special alternative charter schools, collectively enroll 178,000 students statewide. That's about 11 to 15% of all California high school students in grades 10 through 12. The work of alternative schools is to effectively reintegrate kids and teens back into the education system. Jorge Ruiz de Velasco, the deputy director of the Gardner Center, agrees that the positive transition rate for students in schools is about the same as four-year graduation rates for traditional high schools. A positive transition encompasses various milestones such as graduation, GED completion, or transferring to a community college. The data produced by this 10-year study demonstrates the success of nearly 1,000 alternative schools statewide in re-engaging youth in education. Joining us by phone, Principal Carli Norris of Orangewood Continuation High School in Redlands. That is one of California's oldest continuation high schools, having served California students for over 58 years. Carli, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
First off, could you describe Orangewood High School and the work you do there?
Orangewood High School is the continuation school in the Redlands Unified School District. It is the school that serves those students who are not successful in a typical or comprehensive school environment. And as the principal, I supervise students, staff, faculty, etc. And we are really outside the box thinkers, and we just try to do everything we can to find creative ways for students to be successful in an alternative environment.
Yeah. Well, generally, continuation high schools are lumped into the group called alternative high schools, much like they were in this Stanford report that we've been mentioning, along with community and court schools. So, Carli, could you explain the difference between a continuation high school, a community high school, and court schools?
Absolutely. The continuation high schools are typically those that students attend voluntarily, which is the big component here, the big change between the other two. And it is a location for students to succeed in a smaller environment. A community day school is an institution that students attend typically because of behavioral reasons. It is much more restricted in what students are allowed to do. Mm-hmm. And then same with the court schools. A court school is going to be assigned by either a judge or a police officer for a student to attend, but neither a community day school or a court school is a school that students attend by choice. It is assigned to them. And that's the beauty of continuation schools. It is voluntary, and students come here because they know they need a different environment to be successful. Yeah. And once we discover what they need to be successful here, they typically will turn it around pretty quickly and start earning credits towards graduation.
Okay. The Department of Education says that currently there are about 115,000 California students that are going to pass through the state's 519 continuation high schools this year. So what are the typical conditions that bring a student to campuses like yours, Carli? How do they end up there?
So the typical conditions that bring a student to a continuation school will come from some sort of either home-based or school-based trauma. Right now, we have a little bit of a unique situation because we're still dealing with some of the COVID fallout. And so we have a few students here that are behind because of the trauma that they experienced with COVID. But most students end up at a continuation school because of a school-based or home-based trauma, meaning that they weren't successful in school as a young child and they've learned to not trust the school system, or they have a home-based trauma, whether their parents don't support their educational career or, God forbid, some sort of emotional trauma that has occurred within the home. But typically, there's some reason why a student ends up at a continuation high school.
Okay. Who sends that student there? Is it the parents? Does the student request to go there? Is it the school they came from, or is it some other authority?
Well, hopefully it's a team decision. If a student is not doing well in their comprehensive school, typically a counselor has spoken with them and their parents about their progress or lack thereof. And if that counselor is not successful in convincing them that a continuation school is in their best interest, it will typically go to an administrator who's going to hopefully convince them that a continuation school is in their best interest. And then that referral comes over to our school, where we take a look at the student's history, we look at their academic progress, and then we look at to see if we can provide the supports that that student needs to be successful here at Orangewood or any continuation school.
You're listening to Education Insight. So how is the continuation education different from education at other high schools?
Our education is 100% based on teacher rapport with students. It has to be based on engagement and getting the kids to want to be there. And so in a typical comprehensive school, you're going to see students that are attending school because somebody told them that they have to be there, and they're going to go through their 9-to-5 high school career and never miss a beat because that's just what they're conditioned to do. At a continuation school, typically you're going to have a student who doesn't want to be there or has some sort of trauma that they've experienced in a school setting that's going to make them not trust the system. And so what we have to do at a continuation school is we have to get kids back up to what I call baseline. Then we can start working forward with providing the supports and whatnot that they need as far as moving forward. But to get that student up to baseline, it takes a village of staff and counselors to make sure that we help them recover from that trauma that they experienced and give them the confidence to be successful. While in the classroom, it's also really imperative that the teacher really focuses on engaging lessons that are going to help the student find interest in the curriculum. We are really focusing right now on culturally relevant pedagogies and really trying to find strategies that the student can see themselves in. So we're picking works of art and works of literature that have the cultural backgrounds of our students. And so that way they can make a connection with the curriculum, and that will help them engage in not only the class, but in the culture of the school as well.
Carli, all high schools are telling us here at Education Insight that at times it's very difficult to get lean-in from the parents, especially when you're trying to build that team effort that you're talking about. Do you experience the same thing or not so much?
Absolutely. Historically, continuation schools, not just in Redlands, but in surrounding areas, were the schools that, quote unquote, the bad kids went to. It was the school that received the students that were expelled from their comprehensive site or sent there because of behavioral issues. Because a few years ago, we did not have court schools or community day schools to help ease the burden of the continuation schools. They were all kind of lumped together. So I will only speak about Redlands right now because that's where my expertise is. But there's a lot of people in the city of Redlands that does not trust Orangewood yet, because when they were in high school, it was where the students went that were behavioral issues. And so we are really working hard to change the persona and the image of Orangewood within the district. Again, I can't speak for other continuation schools, but many folks, stay in their same community growing up. And so, Fontana, Rialto, Yucaipa, some of these neighboring territories and areas, they're going to have the same issue that we have. And we have to reimagine what a continuation school is, so that way the community will learn to embrace us as a solution to help their student.
Yeah. So it's a whole different ballgame at continuation high schools. Well, in yours in particular.
Absolutely.
Yeah. If you just joined us, you're listening to Education Insight. Our guest today is Carli Norris. She's the principal of Orangewood High School in Redlands. A decade-long plus Stanford University research study on education in California just was released, giving extremely high marks to the continuation high schools of California. Those include Orangewood, and that success is what we're discussing today. So where is the bar for success? I mean, is your goal to get them to a cap and gown, prepared for the workforce, or maybe just back to their original high school and re-engaged? More on the high marks California alternative schools just received, and our conversation with Carli Norris, who leads one of California's oldest continuation high schools, coming up. This is Education Insight. This is Education Insight. Talking today about the 10-year study by Stanford University that showed notable success by California continuation high schools. Orangewood High in Redlands has served the state for almost 60 years. And Principal Carli Norris joins us by telephone. Carli, before the break, I asked what the bar for success at a continuation high school is.
That's a great question. And I think the answer is really all three, because the answer for some students is going to be the cap and gown. For some students, it's to get back to their comprehensive school. And for all students, it should be a post-secondary plan. And so I look at it as tiers, because the tier one is getting them graduated. And so if that means getting them caught up on their credit so they can return to their home school and graduate with their friends at their home school, then that is a champion for that student. If it's a student that is really successful here in the smaller environment that we've created at Orangewood, then success for that student is going to be graduating from Orangewood with a cap and gown. But every student that leaves any high school should have a post-secondary plan, because many students today, more than ever, do not have the forward thinking that maybe some folks had in the past, because there's so many more options for younger kids today. They have careers that folks that are teaching them never had a chance to experience. And so students today, I believe, will change careers 9 times before they retire, which is mind-blowing to me because I've been an educator for my entire career. But students today will change over and over again. So we are really focusing on skill-based sets, because if a student has, we call them the 4 C's, if the student has the 4 C's of success, then they can go from career to career to career and be successful.
Carli, these research studies that have come out, and in particular, this notable Stanford report on alternative and continuation schools, they're saying that continuation schools are doing as good, if not better, than other high schools right now. What are continuation high schools in California? Because that's what the study was about, and that's where the greatest successes were. What is happening in schools like yours that is leading to these notable success rates when a lot of high schools are suffering from what you mentioned at the very beginning of this interview, which was in the aftermath of the pandemic, our students are still suffering? Why the good marks across the state? What is your impression of why that's happening?
It's happening because the folks that are working at a continuation school are champions of students. And I came from comprehensive schools my entire career, but I've never experienced a group of individuals like those that I have here at Orangewood High School that take the time to get to know the student individually and to make sure that they provide supports of the whole child. And, you know, when you're at a comprehensive school, you have 175 students throughout the day. And we can sometimes overlook students because if they're sitting in the back of the class, they might not raise their hand. They might not get called on very often, and they can fly under the radar. Continuation schools by design are smaller, and that allows for individualized educational supports. And if a student is struggling, they need to know that somebody sees them and somebody cares for them. And I've asked students over and over and over again when I'm here at Orangewood High School, what do you need? What can we do to make you successful? Because I thought they wanted candy. I thought they wanted prizes. I thought they wanted, gift cards. And they said, no, we just want a teacher that cares about us.
Wow.
That's it. Yeah. That's what they want. And so I think, California is smart in their design of continuation schools and the fact that it requires us to have smaller class sizes. It allows us to have a shorter day, which allows students to go to work at the end of the day to make it, again, individualized and based on what the students need. And so if you're looking at, like Stanford's looking at all of these California continuation schools, it's because we're allowed to do things and we're allowed to have the flexibility to make it work for the kid instead of having the kid make it work.
Yeah. To be clear, and you touched on this a minute ago, saying that there are people in the community that have an idea of what's going on at schools like Orangewood, and it's not because things have changed. Let's be clear about this. Continuation high schools in the past didn't have a great success rate on the norm. Is that fair to say?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So why would you say that California continuation schools are doing so wonderfully and continuation schools across much of the United States are still in that space that I'm talking about from years ago where there's not a lot of change happening? What's your thought on that?
I think California has done a really good job in identifying appropriate supports for students. As I mentioned at the beginning, a community day school is a school that is designed for students to recover from behavioral issues that they are experiencing on a high school campus. And a continuation school now differentiates themselves from a community day school because we are simply here for credit recovery. And that simple separation allows for students to be able to come into this environment and only focus on their education and not have to worry about the gray and the cloudy of other student behaviors. They can just focus on their education. And so by creating that split between the community day school and the continuation schools has really provided a solid foundation for the continuation schools to focus on the restorative piece that is really imperative for all students to have when they're trying to recover credits. But another beautiful part is that the state of California uses restorative practices in all of their schools. And so if a student attends a community day school because they were expelled from their comprehensive school, they can only do so for a certain amount of time, and the student gets to come back. They get a chance to restore that relationship with their peers and with their school. And so California has done a really good job in allowing that restorative practice to take place both individually with students, but also systemically within their educational system.
Would you say that the model that you're describing of the continuation high school and helping kids come back to learning, would you agree that it's something that traditional schools could learn a bit from?
Absolutely. We talk about it all the time in our staff meetings and our team meetings is, what do we do differently than the comprehensive schools? And it's the fact that we remind ourselves constantly that it is an individual process. We have to meet each student where they're at. And it is our job as the adults to be flexible because the student is coming to us because they need help, not because they all have it figured out. If they had it figured out, they wouldn't be here. So we as an educational system have to have the flexibility to meet every student where they are at and then provide the supports that they need for success. Because oftentimes, students will struggle because they don't know how to bend to the system, because they don't have that particular skill set yet. Those that can bend do, and they are very successful. But those that can't because they don't or haven't developed that skill set yet will typically end up in an alternative environment. And it's our job to be the flexible piece for them and then to build up that skill set within them so that way we can meet them where they are, but then also once they get back to baseline, push them to take that skill set and to extend it further into their post-secondary career.
Yeah. That is Carli Norris, the principal of Orangewood High School in Redlands, one of the many California continuation high schools celebrating very high marks from a Stanford University report just out. Carli, thank you so much for taking the time to join us here today on Education Insight.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And that wraps up our show for this week. Join us next week when we'll talk about the effort to bring a hefty grant to the Inland Empire to improve journalism education and local news. I'm Lacey Kendall. Have a great week.
Education Insight is produced in partnership with KVCR San Bernardino.
Our executive producer is Jacob Poor, and our production engineer is Tyler Veazey.
Alyssa Silva is our production assistant, and Lacey Kendall is your host.
Support is provided by Growing Inland Achievement, working together for inland education and economic success.
And by College Futures Foundation.
Do you have questions or suggestions for the future topics we should be covering?
Write to us at educationinsight.org.
Join us again next time for
Education Insight.